Imagine standing on the sun-baked plains of ancient Persia, the air thick with the scent of dust and decay, the distant hum of a sprawling empire echoing across the horizon. This is the world of the Achaemenid Empire, a land of towering palaces, shimmering gold, and merciless justice, where power was forged in blood and fear. What kind of society would devise a punishment so horrific that it turned the natural world into a weapon of unimaginable torment? Today, we're plunging into the dark heart of Scaphism, a gruesome Persian torture involving insects and starvation. A method so cruel it has haunted history for millennia. These aren't just stories of pain. They're mysteries of vengeance, betrayal, and the supernatural, tales that will grip your soul and leave you questioning the depths of human cruelty. Whether you're driving through the night, working at your desk, or craving a story that dances on the edge of horror, settle in. Let's unravel the torture history of Scaphism and the secrets it buried in the sands of ancient Persia. The Achaemenid Empire, flourishing from 550 to 330 BCE, was a colossus of the ancient world, stretching from the Nile to the Indus, its kings like Cyrus the Great and Darius I ruling as gods among men. Their armies conquered nations, their roads connected distant cultures, and their laws maintained order in a realm of staggering diversity. But beneath the grandeur of Persepolis, with its intricate reliefs and towering columns, lies a darker truth. Persian justice was as ruthless as the empire it served. Scaphism, known to the Greeks as the boats, was one of the most brutal punishments ever devised, reserved for those who committed the gravest crimes: treason, sacrilege, or betrayal of the great king. It wasn't just a method of execution. It was a spectacle of suffering, a ritual designed to terrify the living, appease the gods, and erase the criminal from existence. To understand Scaphism, we must step into a world where power was absolute, loyalty was demanded, and the line between justice and horror was blurred by the relentless buzzing of insects and the agony of starvation. Let's begin with the chilling mechanics of Scaphism, a punishment so grotesque it defies comprehension. Picture a desolate riverbank along the Euphrates, around 400 BCE, under the scorching Persian sun. A condemned man, perhaps a rebel satrap or a disloyal noble, is dragged before a silent crowd, his body trembling with fear. Two boats, hollowed out from cedar or palm wood, are prepared nearby, their surfaces rough and unyielding, perfectly matched to form a sealed chamber. The victim is stripped naked, his wrists and ankles bound with coarse hemp ropes, and forced into the lower boat, his head, hands, and feet left exposed through small openings. The second boat is placed over him, sealing him inside a wooden coffin with only his extremities protruding. Then the true horror begins. Executioners pour a thick mixture of milk and honey over his body, smearing it into every crevice, coating his face, arms, and legs. The boats are set afloat on a stagnant pond or tethered in a marshy swamp, left to bake under the unrelenting sun. Insects, flies, bees, ants, wasps, and worse are drawn to the sweet mixture, crawling through the openings, burrowing into the victim's flesh, laying eggs in his wounds. To prolong the torment, the victim is force-fed more milk and honey through a tube, ensuring he survives as long as possible, his body a living feast for the swarming insects. Death comes slowly, often after days or even weeks, from infection, dehydration, starvation, or sheer agony. This was Scaphism, a gruesome Persian torture that turned the human body into a battleground for nature's cruelty. The mechanics of Scaphism were as precise as they were diabolical. The boats were sealed with pitch or resin to prevent leaks, ensuring the victim was trapped in a humid, airless prison. The small openings allowed insects to enter but prevented escape, creating a one-way passage for torment. The milk and honey mixture was a masterstroke of cruelty. Its sweetness attracted swarms of insects, while its stickiness ensured they lingered, biting and burrowing into the skin. The forced feeding caused diarrhea, which mixed with the honey, creating a filthy, insect-ridden environment inside the boats. The stagnant water of the pond or swamp was a breeding ground for mosquitoes and flies, their larvae infesting the victim's open wounds. The sun's heat intensified the suffering, causing dehydration and delirium, while the confined space amplified the victim's sense of claustrophobia and helplessness. Ancient sources, like Plutarch's Life of Artaxerxes and Titius Persica, describe Scaphism as a punishment that could last up to 17 days, the victim's screams echoing across the water as their body was consumed piece by piece. Medical studies suggest death typically came from sepsis, as infections spread from untreated wounds, or from organ failure due to starvation and dehydration. The psychological toll trapped in darkness, surrounded by crawling insects, unable to move was as devastating as the physical pain, pushing the victim to madness. This was Scaphism, a gruesome Persian torture that redefined the boundaries of human suffering. Why was Scaphism so central to Persian justice? The answer lies in its dual purpose: degradation and deterrence. Scaphism was reserved for crimes that threatened the king's divine authority, such as treason, rebellion, or sacrilege against Ahura Mazda, the Zoroastrian god of light and truth. By subjecting the victim to such a horrific fate, the Persians demonstrated the great king's power to control not just life but death, to turn nature itself against his enemies. The public nature of Scaphism performed in swamps or rivers where travelers and locals could hear the victim's screams served as a stark warning. Defy the king, and you'll suffer a fate worse than death. The use of insects and starvation added a symbolic layer. In Zoroastrian belief, insects were associated with Ahriman, the evil spirit of decay and chaos, making Scaphism a punishment that aligned with divine justice. The victim was marked as an enemy of the cosmic order, their body consumed by the forces of evil they were accused of serving. This was ancient torture at its most calculated, a balance of pain, spectacle, and religious symbolism that made Scaphism a uniquely Persian horror, a tool of psychological warfare that kept the empire's subjects in line. Let's explore a specific story that brings this gruesome Persian torture to life. In 401 BCE, during the reign of Artaxerxes II, a noble named Mithridates was accused of betraying the king by supporting the rebellion of Cyrus the Younger. According to Plutarch, Mithridates was sentenced to Scaphism, his body sealed in boats on a stagnant lake near the royal city of Susa. For 17 days, he endured the torment of insects and starvation, his cries heard by the court as a warning to other nobles. But here's the mystery. On the final day, the boats were found empty, the ropes untouched, the victim gone. Did Mithridates escape, aided by loyal followers who risked their lives to free him? Or was his body removed by Zoroastrian priests to hide a divine omen, perhaps a sign that Artaxerxes' judgment was flawed? Some whispered that Ahura Mazda himself intervened, sparing Mithridates to punish the king for a wrongful sentence. The Persians sealed the records, but the story spread across the empire, fueling tales of a cursed lake where the spirits of the condemned lingered, their whispers carried by the wind. This mystery of Scaphism reveals its power to spark legends, blending the brutality of ancient torture with the supernatural in a way that still captivates our imagination. Let's dive deeper into the mechanics of Scaphism to understand its unrelenting brutality. The boats, typically crafted from cedar or palm wood, were chosen for their durability, able to withstand days or weeks in water without rotting. The seams were sealed with pitch, creating an airtight chamber that trapped heat and moisture, turning the boats into a festering oven. The ropes or leather straps binding the victim were strong enough to hold a struggling man, ensuring no movement, while the small openings for the head, hands, and feet were just wide enough for insects to enter. The milk and honey mixture was a diabolical choice. Its sweetness drew flies, bees, ants, and wasps, while its viscosity kept the insects crawling over the victim's body, biting and laying eggs. The forced feeding, often administered through a reed tube, caused severe digestive distress, adding to the filth inside the boats and attracting more insects, including maggots that burrowed into open wounds. The stagnant water of the swamp or pond was a perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes, their larvae infesting the victim's flesh, while the sun's heat caused burns and dehydration, amplifying the torment. The victim's immobility led to muscle atrophy and pressure sores, which became infected in the humid, filthy environment. This was Scaphism, a gruesome Persian torture that weaponized nature itself, turning the body into a living graveyard for insects and starvation to claim their prize. To understand why Scaphism was so effective, we need to explore the society that birthed it. The Achaemenid Empire was a mosaic of cultures: Persians, Medes, Babylonians, Egyptians, and more united under the divine authority of the great king. The king, seen as a representative of Ahura Mazda, held absolute power, but rebellion was a constant threat in such a vast and diverse realm. Scaphism was a response to this threat, a punishment reserved for high-profile traitors whose actions could destabilize the empire. By using insects, associated with decay and evil in Zoroastrianism, the Persians marked the victim as an agent of Ahriman, their suffering a restoration of cosmic balance. The public nature of Scaphism's screams echoing across rivers or swamps ensured its terror reached every corner of the empire, from the satrapies of Egypt to the steppes of Central Asia. The punishment was rare, used sparingly to maximize its impact, but its infamy made it a legend, a tool of psychological warfare that silenced dissent before it could spread. This was ancient torture that transcended mere punishment, becoming a myth that reinforced the king's divine mandate and the empire's unyielding order. Let's dive into another story, this one from 465 BCE, during the reign of Xerxes I. A Babylonian satrap named Belasis was accused of plotting against the king after the Persian defeat at Salamis, a blow to the empire's pride. According to Ctesias Persica, Belasis was sentenced to Scaphism, his boats set afloat in a marsh near Babylon. For days, his screams drew crowds, their faces etched with horror and fear. But here's the enigma. After his death, the marsh was declared cursed, with locals reporting swarms of insects that attacked anyone who approached, as if guarding Belasy's resting place. Was this a natural phenomenon, a result of the swamp's conditions? Or was it a sign of divine wrath, suggesting Belasis was wrongfully punished? The Persians drained the marsh to quell the rumors, but the story persisted, with some claiming Belasis' spirit summoned the insects to exact revenge on his accusers. This tale of Scaphism shows how the punishment could spark supernatural fears, blending brutal torture with myths that haunted the empire's collective memory. Let's explore the psychological impact of Scaphism on both the victim and the audience. For the victim, Scaphism was a descent into madness. Trapped in darkness, unable to move, surrounded by the relentless buzzing and biting of insects, the condemned faced not just physical pain but existential horror. The knowledge that their body was being consumed alive, piece by piece, was a psychological torment as brutal as the physical agony. The forced feeding prolonged their suffering, denying them the escape of death, while the isolation of the boats amplified their despair. For the audience, soldiers, nobles, or commoners who heard the screams from a Scaphism was a visceral reminder of the king's power. The sound of a man being devoured by insects and starvation was a warning that echoed through the empire, silencing rebellion before it could take root. Some scholars argue that Scaphism shaped Persian religious narratives, with tales of insect plagues and divine punishment echoing its imagery in Zoroastrian texts. Others believe it desensitized the populace, normalizing cruelty as a fact of imperial life. Either way, Scaphism was a shared trauma, a gruesome Persian torture that bound the empire through fear and awe, its horrors etched into the psyche of all who witnessed it. Let's consider another tale, this one from 522 BCE, during the chaotic rise of Darius I. A magus named Gaumata, accused of usurping the throne by posing as a royal heir, was sentenced to Scaphism after his brief reign as a false king. The Behistun inscription, carved by Darius to legitimize his rule, mentions Gaumata's punishment but omits details. Later Greek sources, like Herodotus, claim the boats were found empty, with strange symbols carved into the wood, as if left by unseen hands. Were these the work of Gaumata's followers, attempting a desperate rescue? Or did Zoroastrian priests destroy the evidence to erase Gaumata's legacy and prevent a cult of martyrdom? Some whispered that Gaumata's spirit cursed Darius, whose reign was plagued by rebellions and unrest. This mystery of Scaphism highlights its role as a tool of political control, a punishment that could erase a rival, but also spark legends of defiance that challenged the king's authority. Let's examine the tools of Scaphism, as they were as symbolic as they were brutal. The boats were crafted with precision, their seams sealed with pitch or resin to create an airtight, watertight chamber. The ropes or leather straps were strong, often sourced from the empire's trade routes, designed to hold a struggling victim without breaking. The milk and honey were abundant in Persia, their sweetness a cruel irony in a punishment of such horror. Executioners, likely drawn from the king's elite guard, were skilled in prolonging suffering, ensuring the victim survived long enough to maximize the spectacle. Zoroastrian priests often oversaw the process, chanting hymns to Ahura Mazda to frame the punishment as a divine act, a cleansing of evil from the empire. These tools were not just instruments of death. They were symbols of the king's power, turning nature into a weapon and human suffering into a public monument. The executioners and priests, feared and revered, were the architects of this gruesome Persian torture, their hands stained with the honey and blood of the condemned. Let's dive into another mystery, this one from 480 BCE, during Xerxes' invasion of Greece. A Greek spy, captured near the Persian capital of Sardis, was sentenced to Scaphism for passing secrets to the enemy. His boats were set in a swamp, and for days, his screams unnerved the Persian camp, a grim prelude to the campaign. But one night, the screams stopped abruptly, and the boats were found overturned, the spy gone without a trace. Did he escape, aided by Greek agents who infiltrated the camp? Or did the Persians dispose of his body to avoid bad omens before their march into Greece? Local legends claimed the swamp was haunted, with insect swarms forming strange patterns at night, as if the spy's spirit lingered. The Persians abandoned the site, but the story spread, fueling tales of supernatural vengeance. This mystery shows how Scaphism could inspire fear even among the victors, its brutality leaving a legacy of dread and superstition that transcended the battlefield. Let's explore the social hierarchy of ancient Persia and how it shaped Scaphism. The Achaemenid Empire was rigidly stratified, with the great king at the apex, followed by nobles, priests, soldiers, and commoners. Scaphism was reserved for high-profile traitor satraps, generals, or priests whose crimes threatened the empire's stability or the king's divine mandate. Commoners faced simpler punishments, like flogging, beheading, or impalement. But Scaphism was a spectacle for the elite, a warning to those closest to power that betrayal would not be tolerated. This hierarchy made Scaphism a tool of political control, reinforcing the king's authority while reminding nobles and governors of their precarious position. But it also fueled resentment among conquered peoples: Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, who saw Scaphism as a symbol of Persian tyranny, a spark for rebellions that tested the empire's strength. The rarity of Scaphism, used only for the most heinous crimes, amplified its terror, making it a legend that echoed across the empire's vast territories. Let's consider another story, this one from 404 BCE, during the reign of Artaxerxes II. A general named Tissaphernes was accused of conspiring with Sparta against the king, a betrayal that threatened Persia's western provinces. Sentenced to Scaphism, he was sealed in boats on a river near Persepolis, the heart of the empire. According to Xenophon's Anabasis, Tissaphernes endured days of torment, but when the boats were opened, his body was partially consumed, yet his face remained untouched, as if the insects refused to feed. Was this a sign of divine intervention, sparing his face to mark his innocence? Or was it a deliberate act by his allies, staging the scene to create a myth of divine favor? The Persians burned the boats to quell the rumors, but the story spread, with some claiming Tissaphernes' spirit haunted the river, his voice carried by the insects that devoured him. This tale of Scaphism shows how the punishment could transcend its physical horror, becoming a source of legend and fear that challenged the king's narrative. Let's reflect on the religious significance of Scaphism in the context of Zoroastrianism, the dominant faith of ancient Persia. In Zoroastrian belief, insects were linked to Ahriman, the evil spirit who opposed Ahura Mazda's light and truth. By using insects in Scaphism, the Persians framed the victim as an agent of chaos, their suffering a ritual to restore cosmic balance. Zoroastrian priests played a crucial role, blessing the boats and chanting hymns to ensure the punishment aligned with divine will. But this raised a profound paradox. If the king was the earthly representative of Ahura Mazda, why did he resort to methods associated with Ahriman's decay? Some Zoroastrian texts, like the Vendidad, express unease with excessive cruelty, suggesting that Scaphism risked angering the gods by mimicking the enemy's tactics. This tension between divine justice and human cruelty made Scaphism a complex ritual, its legacy a blend of fear, reverence, and moral ambiguity that shaped Persian religious thought. Let's explore another layer of Scaphism's impact: its role in Persian law and administration. The Achaemenid legal system was a blend of royal decrees and regional traditions, with the king's word as ultimate law. Scaphism was not codified in written codes like the Babylonian Code of Hammurabi, but it was a recognized punishment for crimes against the state, as seen in the Behistun inscription and Greek accounts. Its use was rare, reserved for cases that required a public spectacle to reassert the king's authority. The ritual's complexity, requiring boats, materials, and oversight by priests and guards, made it a costly punishment, used only when the king needed to send a message to the empire. This exclusivity added to its mystique, making Scaphism a symbol of the king's power to bend nature and humanity to his will. But it also highlighted the empire's fragility, as each use of Scaphism risked inflaming rebellion among subjects who saw it as tyranny. Let's dive into another mystery, this one from 490 BCE, during the first Persian invasion of Greece. A Persian commander named Datis, accused of failing to secure a victory at Marathon, was sentenced to Scaphism to appease the nobles who demanded his punishment. His boats were set in a swamp near Ecbatana, and for days, his screams echoed through the royal court. But one morning, the boats were found split open, as if torn apart by an unseen force, and Datis was gone. Did his soldiers, loyal to their commander, stage a rescue? Or did the priests destroy the boats to hide a divine sign that questioned Xerxes' campaign? Local tribes claimed the swamp was cursed, with insects forming the shape of a man's face at dusk. This mystery of Scaphism underscores its power to inspire fear and folklore, its brutality leaving a legacy that lingered in the empire's shadows. Let's examine the role of executioners and priests in Scaphism. The executioners were likely members of the Immortals, the king's elite guard, trained to carry out punishments with precision and loyalty. They prepared the boats, mixed the milk and honey, and ensured the victim's suffering was prolonged, their expertise turning Scaphism into an art of cruelty. Priests, drawn from the Magi caste, oversaw the ritual, their presence lending divine legitimacy to the punishment. They chanted hymns, burned incense, and offered prayers to Ahura Mazda, framing Scaphism as a sacred act of purification. But their role was also practical. They ensured the punishment adhered to religious protocols, avoiding divine wrath. This partnership between soldiers and priests made Scaphism a ritual of both state and faith, a gruesome Persian torture that bridged the mortal and divine. Let's consider another tale, this one from 515 BCE, during the reign of Darius I. A Lydian noble named Pactyas, accused of inciting rebellion in Sardis, was sentenced to Scaphism in a river near Pasargadae. His torment lasted over a week, drawing crowds who whispered of his crimes. But the records, preserved in Herodotus's histories, note a strange detail. The boats were found adrift, with Pactes's body partially intact, as if the insects spared certain parts. Was this a natural anomaly, or a deliberate act by his allies to create a myth of divine favor? Some claimed Pactes's spirit haunted the river, summoning insects to attack Persian soldiers. The river was later diverted, but the story persisted, a testament to Scaphism's power to spark legends of vengeance and the supernatural. Let's explore one final story, this one from 330 BCE, during the fall of the Achaemenid Empire to Alexander the Great. A Persian noble named Bessus, who betrayed Darius III by proclaiming himself king, was sentenced to Scaphism by Alexander, who adopted the Persian method to assert his dominance over the conquered empire. Bessus's boats were set in a desert oasis, and for days, his screams echoed through the camp. But when the boats were opened, they were empty, with claw marks on the wood, as if something or someone had torn them apart. Did Bessus escape, aided by loyalists who opposed Alexander? Or was his body stolen to prevent a martyr's cult from forming? Local tribes claimed the oasis was cursed, with insect swarms forming the shape of a man at night, as if Bessus's spirit refused to rest. This mystery underscores the enduring power of Scaphism, a gruesome Persian torture that left a mark on both conquerors and the conquered, its horrors echoing through history. As we weave through these tales, it's clear that Scaphism was more than a punishment. It was a statement of power, fear, and divine retribution. It turned nature into a weapon, the body into a feast, and fear into a tool of empire. But it also left behind mysteries: empty boats, haunted swamps, cursed nobles that reveal the limits of cruelty as a means of control. Why did the Persians embrace such a brutal torture? Perhaps it was their way of asserting divine authority, of taming a vast empire through terror. Or perhaps, in their quest for order, they unleashed horrors that still haunt our collective imagination, a testament to the cost of absolute power. Now, as we draw this journey to a close, let's step back and ask, what does Scaphism tell us about ancient Persia? It reveals a civilization of grandeur and terror, where kings ruled as gods but feared betrayal at every turn. It shows us a society that balanced beauty with brutality, order with chaos. And it reminds us that even in the heart of an empire, humanity wrestled with its darkest impulses. Scaphism was not just a gruesome Persian torture. It was a story, a warning, a mystery that shaped a dynasty. Its echoes: buzzing insects, empty boats, restless spirits linger as reminders of a time when justice was written in honey, blood, and the relentless hunger of insects and starvation. If this dive into the torture history of Scaphism gripped you, I invite you to join us for more journeys into the shadows of the past. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and share your thoughts below. What's the most chilling aspect of Scaphism you've heard? Do you think the Persians were cruel, or were they simply masters of control? If you're hungry for more dark history, check out our next video on the brutal punishments of ancient Sparta, where pain forged legends of its own. Until then, keep exploring the mysteries that shape our world. Stay curious, stay brave, and let the stories of history haunt your dreams.